welcome to the dungeon with Harlan and Andrew.
This is a tradition. Well, at least we're not muted to start. We just have to have some tradition. So, would you rather hear us or be blinded? Those are your two choices. Sweet. Well, I'm Andrew Overdahl. I'll just single-handedly host. My name is Andrew Overdahl. This is the Dungeon. This is a show all about running tabletop role-playing games, and we have a guest. We have a special guest for this episode. Please welcome Nick Riccardi. Thank you, Nick, for taking time out of your day to be on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Just, I guess, right off the top, what is your history with tabletop role-playing games?
Well, I think I ended up getting into this show because my recent history involves DMing various kids in D&D 5e adventures, particularly during lockdown. When I was in middle school and high school and maybe a little bit of college, I played AD&D and some various other stuff that I can barely remember. There was a spies-related one. There were a couple of superheroes games, Champions, I think was one of them, that I enjoyed. And then I didn't really play for a very long time. And what's funny is that my two boys, who are ages 7 and 11, and I were at the house of a friend of mine from college who used to tease me mercilessly whenever I would go play D&D with a couple of friends on a Friday night, just like any red-blooded 20-year-old would do. And her kids took my kids aside and introduced at least the older one to D&D and created a character for me. Got so excited and was begging me last fall to let him play D&D and let him play D&D. And I didn't think the kid could DM himself right away, and so he needed a couple of people to play with, and he converted a couple of his friends, and I thought, well, I guess I should DM to get them started. And that was 6 months ago, and I've been doing I think I have 2 different campaigns running now, and I think I owe them a couple more in the future. This obviously became a real, he of course now is running his own campaigns as well. This became a real godsend recently during lockdown when, he and his friends were desperate for any sort of activity, interaction with each other. And they were able to, play on, just very basic stuff on Zoom. And that was great. And we've kind of kept it up as things have eased. In fact, tomorrow we are going to try and do our first in-person, socially distant D&D session in our backyard, provided we don't get rained out.
Nice. That's very cool. Yeah, I've been looking to set up my backyard for some in-person games once again, so that'll be great.
Oh man,
that's so cool that your kids get to play. Harlan and I, we both lamented in previous episodes neither of us played D&D as kids, so we missed out. So it's cool that your kids get to play it when they're at the age where it's like the coolest thing. And like, I think it's cool as an adult, but I'm always like, oh man, this would have been so amazing to have when I was a kid.
And how big are the parties that you're playing with?
They've gone from 4 to 6.
Okay.
Usually.
Yeah. And I think Andrew's talked about this before, on here. Do you face any specific challenges with DMing for kids?
Well, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of challenges.
Yeah, but I guess like,
I mean, to put it
besides the big wild,
I haven't really DM'd for adults since I basically only played when I was a kid / I guess technically young adult in college, right? So it's not like I have a ton of experience DMing like guys my age. But I mean, when you're DMing kids, especially one interesting thing is that these guys. My son is going into 6th grade, but they're younger than even I was when I remember starting playing. I think I was in 7th grade or 8th grade, so I was probably like 13, maybe 14, 12 at least. My older one started this when he was 10. Last fall. So so there's it's a little more intense at first sometimes for them. They can have a hard time if a character is in danger of dying. It can be a little tough. Some kids very clearly, especially when you're doing it remotely, but even when you're doing it in person, they'll roll their die and put their hand over it and tell you if they got I got an 18. Oh, I got a 17. Oh, I got a 20. So there's a lot of that. You kind of design encounters presuming that certain characters are never going to miss. There's some of these kids are very interested in combat and they kind of want a lot of combat. So if you are trying to do something that's more role-playing oriented or plot oriented or puzzle oriented, you definitely have to keep sprinkling in the combat. I learned that the hard way when I had a kind of like urban mystery plot that the group basically fell apart because the kids just couldn't figure out what to do other than stab people, threaten them, or ask them to give them magic.
Well, so like
the 3 tenets of D&D.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's interesting from a game I think that applies to prepping for any party, right? Like anybody's going to have different wants and needs. I think it's interesting to hear that and immediately think like, okay, like what game mechanics do you have to like catch yourself spending the most time on?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the thing about kids is, right, they're just this kind of, in a way, more amplified version of us.
Yeah.
So it's like, right, there are always people who, I mean, when I played, I was more interested in kind of combat / puzzles, type stuff than like origin stories.
Yeah.
Right? So some of these kids are very interested in origin stories. Like, I tried to incorporate one kid's origin story into an adventure, and he freaked out. And then he sent me like a 6-screen email about how his origin story had been meant to go this way. And I was like, and again, it's like you can have a situation, I imagine, with an adult player, or at least in my experience with a 20-year-old player, I'd say a college junior, who would be like, dude, that's not how an origin story goes. But probably,
yeah,
whatever, we'll figure. Yeah, with the kid, it's like, oh my God, I had this origin story I've spent weeks in quarantine thinking about, and you can't mess with my origins.
I mean,
so just, everything's a little more augmented in that sense.
I've been that character,
also,
like as a player, like
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But everything's kind of more fun too. I mean, it's really nice when it's tough when they're not all physically in one place, but it's nice when they kind of suddenly, oh my God, we did it. We beat this thing or that thing. They can, they look good.
And just to be clear, what are the age range of, like, what are we counting as kids
we're
here?
Talking like, we're talking about 10 to 13.
Okay, cool.
That's pretty much the range.
It's like
so
middle
yeah,
schoolers.
like kind of middle schoolers basically. Late. There's a couple of kind of rising 5th graders, and then everybody else is going to school and stuff like that. And that's, I think those are kind of the peak years. I was having a conversation with the father of one of the kids, and we were talking about how, like, in a way, you don't, at that age, you don't want to play a game that's, you don't want to play some little board game where you move the pieces around, right? That's kind of too basic. But there still kind of have to be rules, right? There still has to be some sort of framework for how the world works. And so something like D&D is this great kind of intermediate step between, like, the realities of life, which is like, you never know what's going to happen, or, it's not like you're 15th level and don't have to worry about 3rd level guys. Like, you just don't know what's going to happen in life, right? That's a scary thought that adults are used to. When you're in that age, you're moving from, oh, well, if my piece lands on this square, this will always happen, to, holy shit, I never know what's going to happen. And it's really just,
it's
really just all a crapshoot.
And that's such a good, like, I think the rules can be a barrier for players a lot of the times. And I think that's such a good way of kind of like tweaking what we're talking about here, is we're just talking about like a consistent world. And I think that's a thing I'm struggling with in some of the games I'm in, is just establishing like, okay, this thing is true. and then that means this thing is true, and then thing is true, which is my favorite work as a dungeon master. But it's also hard to communicate to players, outside of like, oh, when you hit and this attack works. When you're starting to like DM and do your own things, or communicate to people who aren't going to know every rule already, then it's that, exactly what you said of like establishing how the world works is so cool.
Yeah, it's like there's a great desire for, like, they want maps, they want really detailed stuff that I actually don't usually have. Like, there's all sorts of stuff now. Actually, my kid is now, my older kid who got into this is now on Incarnate all the time, designing his own world. And when he does his campaign, it's this kind of incredibly in-depth thing. And I have this idea in my head, but I haven't had like time to grab hex paper and draw it out the old-fashioned way that I used to when I was like 15, right? Yeah. And I don't ever get a chance to learn Incarnate because he's staring at the iPad all quarantine long. So, but that, they're very into that kind of immersive, like, there's an explanation and things work this way and that way, and you've got to, but then there's the randomness, the introduction of that.
You said your sons have started to run games as well?
Well, so the cute thing about this is that the older one runs. He's actually a kind of scary good DM. We have like a little family game once or twice a week sometimes. And so he runs us. He gets very excited about that. But he has a group of friends who he started doing. He actually at one point was juggling two of them. One group was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and one was Tuesday, Thursday during lockdown, because there was just so much spare time. He couldn't leave the house or see anyone. So they would just do these Zoom adventures. He got one group from 1st to 20th level, in the course of quarantine. And now they've started again at 1st level, I guess.
Wow, that's so cool.
So and learning life skills, scheduling games with your friends, like that could just, you can get a job out of that if you can schedule.
Actually, I always, in high school, I was kind of the weirdo in high school who then ended up like kind of organizing the parties and get-togethers for a large group of people, because I think I became like I was the DM guy, right? I knew how to like organize things, get everybody doing something. Like, all right, guys, we're gonna go play softball on this day, and here are the teams. And, it's just kind of a certain instinct. So there's something to be said. But the younger one who's got this kind of crazy imagination, has started playing what he calls no dice D&D. Where he will, this is the best. Where he'll just like he'll say like, "Man, you're playing those two." Okay, who do you want to be? He's got like swords and this like golden bow. And it's like, okay. He's like, all right, so you're standing in a village, and then you see these like shadow people come in, and then what are you gonna do? Well, I'm gonna try and talk to them. Well, they draw a weapon and attack you. What are you gonna do? Well, I'm gonna attack. Okay, so you do a backflip, and then you stab one of them, and then you kick him, and he goes flying across, and then like 30 minutes later, right? Somehow you're fighting like 8 dragons, and it's just this nonstop.
That's so great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I love it.
That's his invention.
That's awesome.
My daughter's 10 and she DMs games, and she's just freestyling the craziest stuff off the top of her head, and you just have to strap in for the ride. You're like, what is happening? It's like it gets so surreal sometimes.
But that's great. I wish I could do that more as a DM. It's like I think I cling to the rules sometimes as a guide for me, when I wish I could just be like, all right, yeah, this thing is just here. What do you do? Like,
it's just how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I've always been fairly relaxed. I mean, I think one thing that helps with the kids is that and again, I've only played it really as a kid, as it were. Even now, I guess I'm playing it as a kid and now I'm DMing kids. But I've always been relatively relaxed about the rules. Like, I can get very anal about certain things, but in general, it's kind of like I keep it fairly pared down. I'm not worried about like your encumbrance or how much everybody's carrying. Or there's one guy who likes to collect items, and at a certain point, I'm like, yeah, you can't have more than 7 or 8 weapons that you picked up. It's just not feasible that you would be walking around with all that.
Just an insane, yeah.
But it's this thing. The kid is really into like the idea that he collects, like, grab a weapon, they fought a skeleton giant crocodile. He was like, can I get the giant crocodile's bones of its head so I can wear it like over here? He was so into that. And I was like, sure, it's a smaller giant crocodile.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's nothing players love more than to wear the skull of a monster that they've
Yeah.
they've killed. Classic,
Grotesque
classic
trophies.
ask. Yeah.
Um,
Totally.
there was a recommendation of the chat for to check out Arkenforge for map making too. Just from some of the stuff you're talking
Arkenforge.
about, somebody checked it out.
Oh,
So
okay.
Cool.
we're
I'll
not
check that out
sponsored
too.
by this, but just
All right.
someone was helping you out. So check it
I
out.
will. At this point, the 11-year-old is like my guide to the new online D&D world, since I'm such an analog.
Oh,
You know,
boy.
I learned the whole game analog, so like, I'll ask him to scout it for me.
Yeah, I still do a lot of stuff by hand. I like to do all my stats by hand and stuff. I can't do them on a spreadsheet. So I just have pages and pages and pages of stats, and I have to when I'm running a game, I have to
Yeah,
leaf through all this
I keep
clutter.
track. I keep track of all the stuff on just little notebook paper, and I'm like, all right, who's going in the initiative count? All right, and how much damage? I mean, it's limiting because I've kind of tried to learn some of the new online tools like Roll20, but they're way too complicated to try and have. I've realized Andrew actually what I think you through a mutual acquaintance, Andrew was advising, I think, but he may not have known it, like when I started doing this during quarantine, like you don't try and use any elaborate online system with kids. It's too much to ask them to install it and learn. And I figured that out pretty quickly when I was like, yeah, I'm having a hard time with some of this. There's no way I want to talk 5 kids through it online.
So you solely do theater of the mind for combat. You're just talking them through like distances.
Yeah,
and,
I'm just
that's
talking
awesome.
them through distances, and it's kind of a mental. I mean, when we're together, there's when we were together, there were maps and all right,
Yeah.
and now it's like, I mean, for like we're currently doing, there's a huge combat, and so I'm taking a map, I'm taking a photo of the map and putting it on on Zoom and pinging places where everybody is, and putting in
Nice.
like, okay, your guys are in this square, like square 100 feet or something like that.
Yeah.
We're over here, and
that's so
but
cool because it
that's
just goes to show. I feel like that. Sorry, yeah, it just goes to show that like I feel like like anything can be a D&D game. Like you should DM for your kids because they don't need to know all the rules or whatever. Like you can make the game anything you want it to be. And so yeah, whatever if there's 10 dragons that show up because your 15-year-old DM says there are, like do it and just go for it. Yeah, that's great.
Totally. It's a nice perspective to have playing with kids for sure. Like adults are so analytical and savvy with it, they'll like turn your puzzle over and figure it, but a lot of times kids are like, let's just smash this puzzle. Like they'll like the way that they think about things is it's definitely a different mindset to DM for them for sure. Are you running for the kids? Are you running like a homebrew or a published adventure?
So one homebrew, but then my kid asked me to run through the Lost Mines of Phandelver and now Storm King's Thunder. He wants me to run him through Curse of Strahd, but I think he's a little scared. So we'll save that up.
Dude,
Nice.
I'm scared of Curse of Strahd.
I remember reading the original Ravenloft when I was like 3 or 4 years older than he was. I was like probably like 13 or 14. And so I remember being like, dang, man, this is insane.
Yeah.
And I don't think I ever played it with my friends. Actually, I think all of us were a little scared. Or I might have started it, but we never got any. We didn't get very far back then. But like, yeah, that's some pretty, But he's very into, and I remember this when I was young. You kind of see these pre-made modules, and it's like they've got this artwork on the cover, and you think like, wow, that's this whole world. I have to experience that world. So he's he's really geeking out, and so he's very into those things. As are some of his friends who are more into into it. They talk about like, oh well, what about this? What about I don't even Baldur's Gate or whatever they are now. I can there's a lot I haven't really looked at because they cost like $50 a pop now, which is.
But it's so cool. Like just that feeling, I think, is something I try and always recreate in the game. Is like where you see, like you see a little pinhole into this world, and then you're like, oh boy, what else is here? Like, if this is here, why is it here? Who's doing this? Like, how did Strahd get to be like this? Or whatever, like that just that drive to know more, I think, is one of the fun things to try and introduce in your game. in any way that you possibly can.
Yeah, it definitely helps to have, and the kids very much want detail and a sense that they are free to choose where they're going and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
like, they were very resentful. The latest homebrew I did was had them starting being like kind of quasi kidnapped by a Rakasha and taken to a new continent that they didn't know their way around, and given all these tasks to do, which was, I guess, a little, upon reflection, maybe for 10, 11-year-olds, was maybe a little intense, but they were rather resentful of it. But they're finding their own way now.
Yeah, well, so there was a question in the chat. I think that fits in perfectly. Do you scale your monsters like to bring something cool to them that's like maybe they're not ready for level wise? Do you do that often? Do you have any tips for how to do that?
Yeah, well, in general, I'm a believer in you want to create productive fear in your characters. So, like, I always try. I mean, I think you want them to feel, and it's tricky, especially with kids, because you want it. Like, I've told my oldest, who can be a little nervous sometimes, like, guys, like, in the first campaign, I had them find magical dice that would, if any of them had ever died, they were going to kind of magically redo the roll, right? And I have other kind of things, and there are other kind of escape routes that if anybody dies, they can get brought back relatively painlessly. But I also think you want to make them feel like they're at risk rather than, because kids want to feel like I can just walk in and bust heads and beat anything.
Yeah.
But then that quickly becomes, you can kind of see them almost starting to turn like mean and bored with that ability.
Yeah.
So you want to kind of keep. I find you want to kind of keep some sort of menace or threat over them, but you have to be very careful with it because you don't want to actually scare them. But you want to make them feel you want to make them feel just insecure enough. So, you have them like walking with a demon at first level, telling them that they're going to go run an errand for him. They can't say no, and they know that. And like, I think we'll see. Maybe they'll eventually care. But
yeah,
I think it's a good way to start. Just, I try and do that in general. I mean, I would try and do that again back in the day when I was DMing.
Yeah, I mean, I think
try and make sure there was a big scary thing so that people felt vulnerable. I think that's part of the fun of
I try and do that with adult players, that like it's instead of like scary or whatever, I feel like it's hard to not slip into this just common narrative for bad guys, or just like edgelord, just like mean, saying crazy things, and like no one wants to just like continue to play a game where this sucky person is being mean to you. Like, so finding that balance of like, I'm threatening you, but I'm not overwhelming you. No one likes you, but it's not like stuck on just this you as a DM saying mean things to people. It's a tough balance,
right?
Yeah.
And you're going to get to choose your own path and have your own free will, but you also have to have you have to be healthily afraid of what's out there.
Yeah, that good term, productive fear. I'm going to add that to my toolkit. Yeah,
productive fear. That's as soon as you said that, I was like, I also was like, I'm going to write that down. So that's a good tip. Everyone listening, take that with you.
Productive fear.
Put productive fear in the game.
A table of questions, and if you're in the chat and you have any questions, we can do those after this. But we have like a table of questions. If you want to roll a d20, and we can see what comes up here.
Let's see what I get. Of course, my eyes are going. So a 12.
A 12. Okay, we sort of already asked this, so we could have you reroll. But I'll ask
give him
the
advantage.
question.
Give him advantage.
A 12 is your favorite published adventure that you've ever run. But if you've only really done the Minds of
favorite published adventure that I ever run. I mean, it would probably be one of the old ones that I can't.
Which one? I'm a big 2E guy.
Well, no, this is before 2E, man. I'm AD&D. I went AD&D and I skipped to 5e. So I've missed everything. So, in fact, I'm in the market for recommendations of 2E, 3E, or whatever has happened in between these two things. Because
oh, boy. Well, you and I got a sidebar.
We have a Spelljammer game that we played set in space. That's pretty fun. It's like sailing ships magically traveling through space, Spelljammer stuff.
Sounds good. That sounds good. I mean, I expect at some point the kid's going to want to move on to other RPGs, and, I might have to learn a lot. Or maybe at that point he'll have a good enough circle and handle on how to run things. I mean, he's already a pretty good DM, frankly. So maybe he'll be able to just move on from one to the other, and I can just stick here like a cranky old man.
Well, if you ever want to talk Planescape, you ever want to talk Spelljammer, you want to get into some 2E with me, let's do it.
I will say there's an old series called Desert of Desolation that I'm going to try and slip into this homebrew from AD&D times. That's kind of like, Egyptian themed pyramids and,
Cool.
lost gods and stuff that I always liked as a kid and I thought was really cool. So there's conversion packs online. So I'm trying to get one of those
Nice.
to convert my old modules that I can take the kids through. So let's keep that as
Cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's very cool. Do we have any questions in chat?
Yeah, there was. We kind of talked about this a little bit, but I think the specifics of this are a good question. Do you think that miniatures help kids get engaged in D&D, or just jump into the world, or is it kind of like you said you're running it without it right now online? But when you've run it for kids, have you noticed miniatures and like a grid be helpful as like an entry point?
Oh, so yeah, so I do know like they love miniatures. They absolutely adore the miniatures, and particularly my son is really into he makes miniatures for his parties. He'll like paint them.
That's awesome.
Which is very cool. And he got for his birthday, which was during lockdown. I mean, the whole thing sucked. One of his presents was like a set of tiles and stuff, so that you can move your miniatures and pieces around and have the whole map laid out. And he's so excited to use them. And we might bust them out tomorrow in the backyard. I'm not sure the backyard is the best one. But typically it would just be in here, like here's a map, 10, 10, 10, corner here. Okay, who's standing here? Who's standing here? Who's standing here? Who's standing here? Yeah, very basic stuff. And I do things like they'll fight, and it might be a 10-foot wide space. I'm still gonna let the rangers in back shoot their arrows, and I'm still gonna let a couple of people swing their swords, even if technically I shouldn't, because I don't want them to have to worry so much about the logistics. Like that's one example of where I really like let the rules slide.
Yeah.
I mean, there are times where I'll say like, all right, this is a really narrow space, only one person can fight at a time, but that's because it's literally designed for that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's a choke point.
Totally.
Cool.
Did we?
I think we
Nick
might have
froze on my end.
Yeah, he's frozen for me too. Oh no.
Oh,
Are you
he's
back? We got you? Maybe.
Did I really?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's
Just for a
froze.
second. You're good.
No,
I'm
we got you back.
I'm here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well,
All right,
cool.
great. Is there was there anything you'd like to plug, or where people can find you?
I'm not. I mean, I don't know. I guess Andrew knows how to get a hold of me. I guess if your kid wants to try and join an adventure, I don't know. We're a little also subscribed already, but like, hey,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like nowadays, particularly, it's a really healthy thing for kids to do this because they're not staring at a phone, playing a video game. There's numbers. You have to work in teams and solve problems and use your imagination. It's a lot better. I think it's a lot healthier to be a kid into this than when I was, a kid and was into it. So.
For sure. Well, yeah, tweet at us. We'll put you in touch. If there's a dad in the chat or a mom in the chat who wants to spitball with you, we'll connect you.
All right.
Yeah, and 6 kids. Tip of the hat to your patience level, because I give for like 2 kids at a time, and
the 6-kid group is the one that fell apart. So I've generally capped it at 5, but yeah.
Oh man, brutal. Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah.
And
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this podcast will be out shortly. We actually have a double header, so we'll be back in just a couple of minutes with another episode.
Yeah, so if you're in chat, stick around, hanging out. We're going to have another guest hop on here, a twofer. So, thanks so much.
All right.
And
thanks so much, Nick.
We'll be right back.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for having me. See you guys.
Don't forget, tip your DM.